Today, we recognize World Press Freedom Day. It comes at a moment when press freedom is at a 25-year low, according to Reporters Without Borders. Now, at a moment when journalists face intensifying threats and media consolidation ramps up, a new documentary tells the story of journalist Amy Goodman, the host of the independent daily news show Democracy Now!, who has spent the last 3 decades doggedly holding the powerful to account. Here's a clip from the trailer of Steal This Story, Please.
My first impressions of Amy.
What did you say to those who say that you're a war criminal?
Man, she doesn't care what anybody thinks.
Well, don't push me. I'm a journalist here.
Independent media is the oxygen of a democracy.
And Amy Goodman joins us now. She's the host and executive producer of Democracy Now! You just celebrated 30 years, an incredible milestone, Amy, for any journalist, let alone independent journalist. But I want you to kind of reflect on this moment that we find ourselves in, having seen the past 30 years, and whether or not it is more difficult now to operate in an independent media environment or harder, given the fact that you have a president who's going after journalists and media organizations.
Right. We have a president who calls the press the enemy of the people. That is extremely dangerous. There's a reason why freedom of the press is enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution. It is essential to the functioning of a democratic society. And the flip side of that is the public's right to know. That's why we are here. And then people can make up their own minds. But the idea that this is under assault is extremely dangerous for democracy, and we have to take it extremely seriously.
But is it harder for you as an independent journalist now over the past 30 years, or do you find it easier right now? I don't know if easier is the right word, but are you finding that there's more public support coming from individuals and the way that Democracy Now! Is supported?
Well, Democracy Now! Is supported by a global audience of readers, listeners, and viewers. It's on 1,500 public radio and television stations around the world, but also online. But, you know, the Trump administration has zeroed out the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And as this film, Steal This Story, Please, has come out, we go around the country and do the Q&As afterwards, but hold fundraisers for public television and public radio, especially the poorest stations and Native American reservations on rural areas. I am really concerned that these stations are going to close. There's a reason why the CPB was set up. In the 1960s, you had Johnson. Bill Moyers was in the White House. And the media activists said, with the hyper-commercialization of the media, we need to protect an educational public space. And now they have just eviscerated that. It's really serious.
Well, at the same time that public media has been defunded and is under attack, you've also seen the proliferation of a lot of citizen journalists and sort of like micro-journalistic organizations, people who are influencers on platforms like TikTok or Instagram. How do you think that has changed journalism as an industry, or the kinds of information that Americans are able to, or in fact, seek out?
I mean, we could never have predicted the way the social media platforms have come into being, and there is a lot good, I think, in this. You know, at Democracy Now!, it's 8 to 9 every morning, and classes come in from around New York City, maybe high schoolers, journalism students, mid-year journalists from around the world. And I always say to them that on the one hand, we can get more information not from the traditional gatekeepers. That's what the internet has provided, and social media platforms. On the other hand, it can be a global rumor mill, and we all know with young people, they can just get surrounded by silos of hate. So how do you find trustworthy information? DemocracyNow.org is a great way to go to as a kind of gateway for seeing what people are doing all over the world. Reporters Know No Borders. We are a global news organization, and what we do mostly is bring out the voices of people at the grassroots who are closest to the story, not your typical pundits who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong, but the people who are affected most. And it's trying to figure out, as I say to these students, what exactly you can trust, and doing really just the tenets of good journalism, being fair and accurate. When someone can't tell their own story, maybe their livelihood is threatened, maybe they've been disappeared, family member's been killed, you find someone else who's close to that. And I always talk about going to where the silence is. That is our job as journalists. And sometimes it's not so quiet. It's raucous, it's rowdy, people are organizing, but it doesn't hit the corporate media radar screen. And that's where we live.
You've been remarkably consistent over the course of your career. People can tune into Democracy Now! And they know what to expect, and they know how you are going to question an interviewer, the person you're interviewing, without fear or favor. What has driven you and what motivates you throughout your career?
To hold those in power to account. That's our job as journalists. We're not there to win a popularity contest. We're not a party to the parties. Whether I'm questioning the late President George H.W. Bush or President Clinton, whether we are talking with public officials today, it's to get at the truth. Or in many cases, there are truths. I'm not talking about facts that are just solid and you really can't question them, but hearing how people perceive things. And I think the most important thing is talking to people at the target end of, in our case, the most powerful country on earth, the United States, of foreign policy. So when you have the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran, you're talking to Iranians, Iranian professors, academics, poets. When we're talking about the hundreds of journalists who've died in Gaza, talking to people in Gaza, Palestinians, talking to Israeli peace activists, going to the heart of the story. That's why we call Democracy Now! News with a heart, the exception to the rulers.
Amy Goodman, thanks so much, and congrats on the documentary.
Thank you.